Hey everyone, welcome back to our channel. If you're new here, please subscribe. I'd really love that. If you're returning, how you doing? What we're going to be talking about today is, if you remember a few months ago, the power grid attacks and the outages that it caused. Well, since the multiple attacks on the power stations in 3 states that left thousands of people without electricity, investigators still don't know who targeted the grids and why. Now, the FBI is offering rewards in upwards of $100,000 for information about these attacks in Washington State, Oregon, and North Carolina. Interfering and tampering with the power grid can have consequences. An attack like this is not just an inconvenience for home and business owners. Think of medical facilities, vulnerable people who depend on electricity for their health. The call for this information comes as concerns grow about increasing attacks on the power grid tied to rising domestic extremism in the U.S. Now, what exactly happened in the substation attacks? Early on November 22nd, about 5,200 people lost power after someone fired multiple rounds on the Barnes, that's B-A-R-N-E-S, Lake substation in Tumwater, Washington. And 2 days later, and about 125 miles south, someone vandalized the Bonneville, B-O-N-N-E-V-I-L-L-E, Power Administration Ostrander substation in Oregon City, Oregon. Investigators found a hole cut in the perimeter fence and bullet holes in several reactors. Officials have said it's unclear what motivated the attacks or even if they were related. They said, "We announced the rewards," and they issued posters jointly to raise visibility on the issue. They are looking at all the possibilities at this point. Now, the following month, someone fired multiple gunshots at 2 Duke Energy substations located 10 miles apart in Moore County, North Carolina. The December 3rd attack caused a massive power outage affecting 45,000 customers, with some losing power for as long as 5 days. And then, on January 17th, someone fired another substation about 40 miles north of Randolph County. And investigators do not believe that the North Carolina shootings are connected, according to the Charlotte field office. Now, the FBI field offices in Portland, Seattle, and Charlotte are offering up to $25,000 for information on the respective incidents. The Moore County Sheriff's Office is offering an additional $75,000. Vandalism and suspicious activities at electrical facilities have soared nationwide last year. Federal data shows this. From September through the end of the year, attacks or potential attacks were reported on more than a dozen substations and 1 more plant across 5 states. On Christmas Day, attacks on 4 substations in Washington left 15,000 people without electricity. 2 men were arrested for this incident, and one told police that he planned to disrupt power to commit a burglary. And attacks on power grid substations have gripped our nation's attention in recent months because of the devastating threat that they pose to our infrastructure. Entire communities, hospitals, schools, local businesses might conceivably be incapacitated for many days. Now, while motives are not yet clear, these attacks come as federal agencies and law enforcement and researchers warn that domestic extremists are increasingly targeting the U.S. power grid. The Department of Homeland Security last year said that domestic extremists had been developing credible plans since at least 2020 and would continue to encourage these attacks against the electrical infrastructure. Now, last year, there were 3 neo-Nazis that pleaded guilty to federal crimes related to a scheme to attack the grid with rifles. And these men wanted to attack regional power substations and expected the damage would lead to economic distress and civil unrest. But why? What is your motive? Now, last month, federal officials charged them in Florida and a Maryland woman also in a conspiracy to disable the power grid by shooting out substations via sniper attacks in the Baltimore area. And the Maryland U.S. Attorney Eric Barron said that these fueled attacks would have threatened the lives and left thousands of residents in the cold and in the dark. Now, days later, on February 8th, the Department of Homeland Security and FBI issued joint bulletin warnings of racially or ethnically motivated violent extremists looking to attack critical infrastructure, including the electrical. Now, the warnings prompted several House Democrats to request a briefing from Homeland Security on physical and cyber threats posed by domestic violent extremists to critical infrastructure, particularly the energy sector. The grid includes more than 7,300 power plants, 160,000 miles of high voltage power lines, and 55,000 transmission substations. The U.S. energy grid really is a grid of grids, and electric companies have strategically invested to ensure there is no redundancy and smart technologies to isolate these problems. We are seeing these efforts in action now as companies respond to severe weather from coast to coast. I hope this never happens again, but unfortunately, I don't think it's ever going to stop. Alright guys, that's all for this video. I'll see you in the next one. You stay safe, you stay positive, you keep prepping, and as always, fear less. Ciao!